So before we dive in, working full on with pastels, full color, I want to show you a few pieces from life drawing that I've done with pastels and sort of explain some of the differences from drawing from life as opposed to drawing from photo reference. So let's check that out. These are pastels that I did from life, same size as we're working here in the studio today, 18 by 24 or 17 by 22 on toned paper. It's as opposed to working from photo reference, which is what we'll be doing today, is that there are very important differences for me anyway, working from life as opposed to working from a photo, even though when I'm working from photo reference, I'm trying I'm very conscious of the idea that I want this to come alive on a page. And so I treat my reference as like a live model. So, but the differences that I find with the life drawing is, and I guess I could kind of force, some of the strictures that I have when I'm drawing from life, as I do in my classes or at the academy where I learned sort of how to approach pastels this way, the Illustration Academy, and is that one, there's a time difference, right? We're on a timer. Most of these drawings were done within 15 to 20 minutes, so they're pretty quick. And the difference also for me is like when I work from photo reference, I tend to work from grayscale. I flip all my reference to grayscale and I make up my color. What you're seeing here in these images is color choices that I'm making on the fly, given whatever, colors of pastels I happen to have on me, which I try to bring a pretty good assortment today, but what I'm seeing in front of me. So I'm one of these people that if I see a color, it's really hard for me not to put that color down. That's why that I like working from grayscale, because then I'm bringing my own sort of intuition and whatever I'm trying to get across. I may, hey, I want this to be more of a night scene. I want this to be a, whatever. I can push those things without being confused or swayed by the colors that I'm seeing. So I flip everything to grayscale. So it's like I may have a certain set of colors that are not exactly those colors, but they are in the range, right? Oh, it's a red, it's a blue, it's a green. I can play with that. And that's a little of what may happen here working from the photo reference that we have. I didn't flip any of this to grayscale, so, but it's not super colorful reference. So we'll see where that goes. But so image-wise, like this first image, this is a detail of a larger pastel, again, this size, and again, done 15 to 20 minutes. Here's the full on the left, and on the right, the same model, different pose. And you can see like what I'm holding on to in these is this idea of silhouette that we have been discussing and going over with highlights and with shadows. But here now we combine those two strengths into single images. So we'll continue. So here, limited palettes. Again, pushing the silhouette, mostly of the lights. I'm being very selective with darks here, keeping it to a minimum and pushing my lights on this toned paper. Over here is just a light drawing on the right. That's only working with the highlights, but I'm also injecting some color in to kind of kick it and vibrate it a little bit. This was done from life in my class. More, again, just working, I mean, you can see I threw in a hit of color, very subtle here. It's not about color, this piece, but I'm hitting like, some warmth in where where we have joints or where flesh gets close to bone. But mostly it's a value drawing, it's not colorful, both of these. So here again, you can see like I'm really buttressing the negative, the shadow side with a hard edge to kind of let the toned paper be the sort of middle value shadow in the sea of light, right? And again, just that burnt umber that we're talking about using, and Naples yellow light with just a hit of like a pink or a reddish hue. So again, this one over here bringing in a really deep, like I think it's bottle green, which I may even have on me, but I don't know. And pushing it more toward the cools over here on the right, but still you can see where, you know, where knees, fingers, ear, you know, a little bit on the lips, pushing a little warmth, and then lightly bringing in a cool into the shadows. A horizontal piece. And again, it's all about that silhouette. And you can see I'm totally designing with shadow here, right? And then coming in and being very selective about my lights. And, you know, if I was to flip this to, say, a grayscale image, the color is, what I'm doing with color really is very simple stuff. It's not, I'm not getting in there and like, you know, blending and working and thinking, oh, well, you know, the green's got to roll over to, you know, no, it's like a body color. So she had a green robe. Okay, green, boom, robe, done. You know, there's the reflection of, I put this back here, which I could also do with, you know, a very subtle, the Naples yellow, just not push as hard. But this isn't value-wise, is deeper than the Naples yellow. And then because this is a highlight of the negative space, I threw the same blue in here in the hair. So this one is a little funky here. It's instead of using the burnt umber or sepia, I used a deep, I have no idea what blue that was, Ceylon blue or I don't know, but a deep, deep blue. And then, and I have just touches of the pink in here. But I even, this was something that I picked up from John Foster, is just running my fingers over it and creating this sort of an interesting sort of texture and value, and then working back into that, but like drawing through the forms I've already done. But here you can see, like, again, design of light, shape, everything is shape oriented, right? And then there's very selective areas where I let line very subtly pop through. And I'm not actually drawing a line there. It's sort of I've laid sort of a dark down, and then I'm coming over it with a light and just being really sensitive to the edge and letting that create that. Over here, again, very much what we're doing with the two colors. And I just went in with a couple of cools, this ultramarine blue and a light blue and a pink. Boom, you know, just to kind of give the eye a little candy there, right? Again, using another color other than the brown, but still working. This is a different one too, in the sense that working at the Illustration Academy next to Gary Kelly, who you know his work. You may not know his work, but if you go to Barnes and Noble and you see those murals, that's Gary. And he's a line guy, but he's also this amazing designer. And he'll get in there and he'll design the figure with line, and then just put in solids. But he's designing these shapes and these shadow shapes, and I mean, they're just unbelievable. And you know, the figure is just a springboard for him. He's not trying to copy this figure at all. So whenever I'm drawing next to Gary, all of a sudden it's like I want to draw like Gary, you know. So I start working with line, and then coming in the way he does and trying to be more of a designer, more so than I usually am. I always try to design, but he's so blunt with it. And there may be, I'll show you other ones in here that are very Gary. So again, you know, just the two colors with bringing in a little blue and a little red, just to kind of shake it up a little bit. You can see I'm bringing some line work in, but mostly it's just silhouette central, right? Keep it simple. Here again, you can see I went in and they're just simple shapes of light and shadow. And then I went in again with that warm and that cool, just to kind of, again, just give it a little eye candy, but to sort of push that temperature shift, which helps turn form. Warms come forward, cools roll into shadow. And that's on both of these, even though I put this like brutal sort of deep red background in here. But it's, again, value-wise, if you do the squint, you can see the value shift, and it just pops that flesh out, right? So here's one sort of thinking Gary a little bit, where I came in and did some drawing. I'm not being super bold with it. I'm still working it sort of the way I would handle line, which is an incredibly sensual thing with these for me. And then just it's like an ultramarine blue with the Naples yellow light. Over here is just black and Naples yellow white. So it's really bold, and the reason that I've asked you not to use black is because you can see how far apart they are in range. It's like it's too much, and it's effective for something like this because it's so dependent on the silhouette, the stark silhouette. I was doing like some serious, squinting at this figure, and I had her backlit pretty much, right? And so it just was a piece that came out of that happenstance, of that setup. So, but it's too much, where we want a little more subtlety than that, so you can really appreciate sort of the give and take of these two, and not go too far into the jungle here, into the weeds. Now this one was done from a photo ref, and I made up my color. This is Emma, who's no longer a model at Ringling, unfortunately. She was great. But I made up all these colors, and just playing with, my knowledge of having drawn from life as much as I have, and also sort of like throwing in things that I think will, like, there's no blue, wasn't flashing like that, but I love that, that forces the eye to pull more blue out of everything else, So playing with that sort of mind game. This was done from life. Now this one was a little longer. It was at a faculty drawing session. James Martin owns that. We did a swap. He owns that one. And so this one was, I don't remember how long this particular pastel was, but it was probably at least an hour or more. We're sort of, we all get to sort of pitch in and talk about what pose we want and stuff, but ultimately the model gets posed, and you just got to find a good angle. So, and there's not a ton of faculty turnout for the faculty drawing session, which is good and bad, I guess. But James and I go and get after it. So this was done from life, and the colors are pushed a lot, but are sort of what I was seeing, but pushed big time. Like really playing with color and experimenting, but drawing it from life. Here's the simple value structure we have, those two, with just a hit of sort of a pink, just to kind of hit the hot spots, the heel, the toes, the knee, where, the bony protuberances get more blood there, right? You can see it happen in your knuckles when you make a fist. So again, this is just the two colors that we're working with, which makes it just purely just value. But you can see too, what I think is really interesting about this process is that, this could be a hard pose, but what I'm doing is, what the pose is doing is just the stacking, right? So these shapes are stacked. So I have this shape on top of this shape. And because this is darker, it's coming forward a little more through contrast. And so if you keep things simple and think about that overlap, it makes things a lot easier, rather than, oh man, I've got to get in here and I've got to detail this thing. But this is the real building block here. Yeah, and if you want to go in now and noodle and really do up hair and whatever, that's okay, because anything that you do at this point can work because it's already solid, right? Another one that was done from PhotoRef, and I made up the colors. So I'm trying to, just do things where I'm like sort of where you have in reality too, if you start to notice this, where light meets shadow, you have the greatest saturation, but it's on the edge there. It's right when light meets shadow is the highest concentration of saturation. So I've been trying to play more with that. So I've got saturated stuff in here along the edge, which it vibrates, right? It just kind of, it makes the eye vibrate, and it makes it sort of come alive. And if you start looking for this, you'll see it in nature. It's all over the place. And it took Mark English to cue me into that, because he would use it in his work. And I was always like, where's he getting that from? Well, then then you start paying attention. It's like, oh. And if you're an eyeglass person, depending on the lens and the angle that I have my lens, I see more of it than normal, which is wild. It kicks it up a notch. So, but I'd rather not have glasses. Okay. So these were done from life, and here I'm substituting, on the right, I'm substituting just a different color for my dark rather than the burnt umber, just to kind of change things up. And then I'm bringing a green in, and it looks like it looks like I didn't have the Naples yellow. I was using white. So that means I was also using, it looks like the shell pink or something like that day. So here on the right, especially, being more designy, it looks like I've laid in a silhouette with my brown, but not heavy, and then come in on top of that with my light, and then pushing just, that blue and the red again, just to kind of kick it and give some warmth and more volume a little bit to these. So I'm gonna skim here and try and find sort of one of the Gary Kelly deals. I mean, that's sort of like it on the right, but I have better. Yeah, okay. So like this one over here, it was totally a line drawing with some tone, and then I came in with the light and beefed it up a little bit. And that's sort of going a little bit, kind of sort of where Gary goes, although he's much more structural and angular in places with his designs. But I was really happy with those because they were so different from what I normally do. So again, sort of following Gary's lead here a little bit. Not as good, but trying. And today I'll even try and do that a little bit and show you just sort of maybe how that design sense of Gary comes into some of these. Like over here, this one on the right, I know Gary had to have been there that day, right? So I'm like going to Garyland, and they're bolder than I normally do, but I like them. And then switching gears and bringing a blue in instead of my brown. This was from life in my class. So, but again, just light and shadow, and then bringing in a green and a red and a little bit of blue here. Right here, this just has one little hit, everything else is that pale green as the model stand. So same thing, just those two colors on a green toned paper that we used to use, and then with a couple of warm hits on it. So again, just, nailing down that silhouette. It's all about that silhouette. And then like kind of getting funky with, I saw yellow, but I jacked it up so that it would have a hit. And there's that overlapping sort of stacking thing going on again. There's our two colors. This one has just a hit on the elbow and the ear of pink. obviously the one on the right is just playing the shadow game a little bit, but with a lot of line work. This is the line work with the highlights. But what I hope you continually see is this idea of the silhouette and keeping things as simple as possible. Some of these are difficult poses, you know, to draw, some of these angles, but just sticking to the shapes in value and overlap, you can pull it together. This piece on the right was done from a photo supplied to me by this young man's father. They were filming a documentary about him, who I had done a documentary with those two in Romania for Romanian television for National Geographic. And the son was filming another documentary in Romania, and died falling off of it was mountain climbing. And so I did this one on camera, working from some really cool photography that they had of the sun. But again, like, man, pushing those values and the shapes, and then that whole thing that I was talking about earlier with the highest point of saturation where light and shadow meet, and that's what was going on here. I'm pushing that whole idea to an extreme with this yellow and burnt orange color. So here's just light play that we were doing. And you can see, like, I was a lot more direct with these because of the time factor. And this is not where we're going to go, but I thought I would throw it out as this is a pastel drawing, and then I went into it with all kinds of stuff, wax and roofing tar and oils. And it becomes a whole other game, which is a lot of fun. So these are all multimedia, mixed media, but the beginnings are all these pastel drawings. But you can see even so, the same sort of rules are applying, where I'm working silhouette, light and shadow, and then it's sort of like when I bring the wax and stuff in, there's an abstract quality that happens that is entirely accidental, depending on how I'm dragging and what I'm dragging over. And then a line drawing with just going in with my finger and smudging in areas. That's fun too, over here on the right. More multimedia, mixed media. And these are wet pastel, which is something Mark English figured out and showed. And then these were homage pieces I was asked to do by Fantagraphics Books for the they were reissuing and translating all of the Guido Crepac's Valentina graphic novels. And then this was for a festival in France of Sandman. And again, it began as a pastel, and then I brought in. So basically, the reason that I'm showing you this is that there are differences from working from photo reference for me in color and working in color from life. So that's just sort of to underscore that, because there is a difference, and there are challenges that happen also with when you're under the sort of the stopwatch of a live model. Like, well, we have 10 minutes, we've got 15 minutes, we've got that time frame does something to your head and forces you to start thinking in a hold. In the first one can usually kind of suck, but at the rest of them, because you got to get into that mode and into that place of understanding. Wow, the time. Oh, and you'll hear the thing go off, and it's like, damn, if I had 5, 10 more minutes, I could really make this into something beautiful. But you get into that rhythm and you get into that groove, and you start to, get with that program of, okay, I've got a haul of things that I was trying to do. That's for a longer time frame. So it forces you to make, concessions, but concessions don't mean that, you're coming up with shortcuts or that you're short shifting the piece. It's a whole different head on, which is great. It keeps you on your toes and forces you to make decisions you probably wouldn't normally make. And out of those comes a lot of learning and a lot of like interesting, happy accidental stuff that you can take advantage of even on longer pieces for later.